Okay, it says I'm live. Let's check it out. Hoosier Hardware. Live now. I should have put a different thumbnail up. Maybe I'll do that. This is an audio check where... Alright, our audio is good. Our chat's live. I'll put up another thumbnail later on and, later sometime. So we're here, we are live from Hoosier Hardware. This is Hoosier Hardware like 4, something like that, I'm not really sure. We're a few minutes early, that's fine. Haven't tweeted it out yet, let's tweet that out. Write something. I'm live. Figuring out whether or not eSports are regular sports. Hashtag Hoosier Hardware. Okay, so we are live, and I'd say since we're live, let's go ahead and roll that intro. Yada-dum, da-da-dum, da-da-dum. Okay, intro's dead. So, our eSports, regular sports, let's sort of figure that out. And to do that, and by the way, this is going to be a much shorter show than normal. I'm going for about 10-15 minutes here. But in case you're watching this later on, I'm going to go ahead and give a plug. My Twitter handle is @Hoosier Hardware. Hit that like button down below. Also that subscribe button down below. That's awesome. And the topic at hand today, since it's Tuesday and it is Hoosier Hardware Day, our topic at hand is, are regular sports the same as esports, or are esports in the same league as regular sports? Now, I'm going to start with the definition as soon as I close this door because there's noise out there. In a momento. Better. All right. So, are esports on the same field or same playing field as regular sports? So to take a deeper... Are sports and esports the same? So to do this comparison, first thing I want to do is look up a definition, which I've already done for our convenience. In our case, a sport is defined by Google as an activity involving physical exertion and skill in which an individual or team competes against another or others for entertainment. So, the one part of that excludes esports is the physical exertion part. Now, I'm sure that I could come up with a workaround for that. Probably pretty simply as well. But I am not overly concerned about that. So we are not going to concern ourselves too much with that. I believe that if we really wanted to, we could work around that by saying, well, technically moving a mouse is some sort of physical exertion. It doesn't say how much physical exertion, blah, 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 blah. That's all fine and dandy. We're not going to worry about that. In fact, I'm going to more or less ignore the physical exertion part because of this very simple reasoning. And that is that esports have really become popular as a game in a way that no other non-physical sport, at least in my mind, or non-physical game even, really has. Now, this is where you sort of find this argument of, is racing a sport? Is that enough physical exertion? I mean, I would say that it is, and I would say that racing is a sport in pretty much every form. And by the way, when I'm talking about racing, I'm not talking about track and field racing, I'm talking about like NASCAR racing, IndyCar racing. Do those drivers exert themselves physically? I think obviously the answer is yes. So I would say that those are a sport. Obviously, though, chess does not fall under the sport category because that's not really physical exertion. At least in my mind, it's not a sport. The other thing that you have to consider is the entertainment value. Some things are physically exerting and they're in sort of a team setting, but, and by the way, I have no example off the top of my head because these may or may not actually exist. In fact, I'm going to take away that point altogether, but there may be something that exists, and if you know of something, you can comment below or something. But there may be something that exists where you have a team activity, but it's not really for an entertainment purpose. Maybe it's for some other purpose. Sports are primarily for entertainment of not just those playing, but also those watching. And that is where esports has really risen. I'm going to focus around League of Legends and that community because it is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, and also it is the one I am most familiar with myself. Now, there are a few hallmarks of sports in the United States today. First off are popular teams. Now, if you are outside of the esports realm, then yes, I will admit readily that you probably do not know any of the teams or are familiar with the players. But the other argument that I would make is if you are not an MLS fan, so a Major League Soccer fan, you might not really know of any of the Major League Soccer teams or the players that play in the MLS. The same could be said of other lesser sports, the Canadian Football League, the CFL, or the Arena Football League, the AFL. Those teams and players are usually not known by the masses, and that's because they're not widely covered in the media. Same thing with esports. Unless you are in the communities, you probably don't know who that is, but that doesn't necessarily disqualify them as being for entertainment purposes, because there are still people that follow them. They just have to work a little harder to follow those teams and those individual players. Now, one of the major hallmarks that I see, though, of sports in general is the media following. So we have television media. Now, do esports have a television market? Not necessarily in the traditional way. However, esports being electronically based, it makes sense that they would be very progressive in the way they do their broadcast. Now, you'll notice if we go to, and I'm actually going to do this, NALCS VODs. So if we go to the NALCS VODs, you'll go to lolesports.com, and this is the home of the videos on demand, which is VODs, of the LCS, and in this case the NA or North American LCS. Now, one of the nice things about the way that League of Legends does this is these VODs don't reveal anything about the matches, other than that there are, it runs them through Game 5, but maybe you click on Game 5 and this one has one. Maybe. So if you click on Game 5 and there was no Game 5, it's going to tell you, hey, the series concluded before this game was played. So but it does a great job of hiding every detail as much as possible from you. And as long as you're clicking Game 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5, you're going to not reveal anything. So it's really friendly, and because it's not so big that it's on every television station or it's all over your Facebook feed unless you have friends that enjoy that sort of thing, it's very friendly with you catching up after the fact, as long as you stay away from some of the social media places. But it is, in a broad sense or a wider sense, it is a television broadcast. And I'm going to go ahead and play just a little bit of this. And we're going to skip to the middle, and you'll notice that the production quality of this is super great. And we're not going to actually watch any of the actual game. I'm trying to find a scene where okay, so this is the analyst desk. So you'll notice that this is a super phenomenally, at least from a broadcast standpoint, very professionally done. So the media is, or at least the live broadcast is there. So then we go to the media side of things. In regular sports, there is a vibrant media community, whether that be ESPN, Fox Sports 1, other NBC Sports. Outside of the actual broadcast, there is a sports talk forum. Now, there's also blogs, and blogs are much better for fan interaction, whereas the professionally written sites are giving you the media reaction. Blogs are more there for the fans. Now, the nice thing about esports is, again, we have a very vibrant blogging community. Now, one of the biggest communities of blogs, at least in the United States, and maybe the biggest, is SB Nation. Now, SB Nation runs blogs on pretty much every single sports team in American sports. So if you have a favorite NFL team, there's an NFL blog for that. And there's a specific one for your team. So if you're like me, I'm a Jacksonville Jaguars fan, there's a Jacksonville Jaguars blog. BigCatCountry.com, by the way, just so you know. If you're an NBA fan, there is going to be a blog that covers your favorite team. If you're a college sports fan, if it's a Division I school, chances are there is a blog that covers your school's sports. Maybe even if it's a bigger school like maybe Alabama, it will cover just Alabama football, for example. I'm not sure if they structure it that way or not, but there is that. So, is there an SB Nation blog for eSports, or specifically the LCS and League of Legends? The answer is yes, there is. It's called the Rift Herald, or it is just riftherald.com. So it is set up exactly like every other SB Nation sports blog in that it has the exact same alignment, and it is just a blog for esports instead of, regular sports. And it goes through and it talks about different groupings, it gives you previews of games, and this is where, to me, esports really shines as a sport. And that is that because, especially MOBAs like this, very similar to sports in a few regards. First of all, a MOBA has the same layout every single game. So, like an NFL stadium, like a basketball court, there are minor differences in a basketball court from court to court. Dimensions are all the same, but like the paint's different depending on what court you're at and all that. And typically, League of Legends does get some updates here and there that do make minor changes, but over the long haul, it's largely recognizable today as it was in the early days of League of Legends. So the court or the field doesn't really change any, and the rules don't really change any. Now, where there's a little bit of dividing or where it changes a little bit for esports versus regular sports is, in esports you typically have mostly the same players, but on top of that you have characters that the players are playing. So the summoners, which are the players, are playing champions, which are the actual in-game characters, and that's where a team can very quickly adapt and change, whereas in real sports, you're kind of stuck with the players you have, at least for a short period of time. An NFL team today is going to have a hard time making their team a ton better in 1 week, whereas if a League of Legends team gets wrecked 1 week, they just play different champions and try different strategy the next week. Now, largely, it does come down to the player's skill, but they do have more flexibility with changing their team makeup than do regular sports teams. But you get a field that is pretty much the same over and over again, and you get the same set of rules over and over again, and it comes down to strategy and who's the more skilled player. Much like in a physical game, whether it be basketball, baseball, football, soccer, hockey, whatever the case is, you have all those things being in common. The only difference is esports don't have the physical exertion. So, let's go back and start sort of wrapping up this entire episode of Hoosier Hardware. And I know I'm trying to keep it short today, trying to keep it as unnewsy today as possible, because outside of Elon Musk and SpaceX and go to Mars and all that good stuff, there's really not a ton going on in that regard. So, going back to the original question though, are esports good enough or close enough to be lumped in with regular sports? Well, first of all, yes and no. I'm going to cover the no first. No, esports are still not sports. Sorry. If we go back to the definition of sport involves physical exertion. That esports do not have. There is not really I cannot justify moving a mouse rapidly around a screen and clicking on something and hitting a keyboard a few times. Yes, you may jump up and down in your seat a little bit when you make a big play, whatever, but that is not a sport. That being said, are esports getting big enough where you could start to see some actual, more mainstream coverage of them? And I think the answer to that might be yes. I don't think it's there yet, to be clear. I think that as the current generation of early 20s people that are largely the ones that are into esports, at least I assume. I haven't looked up those numbers, but I think that's a fair assumption to make, that most viewers of esports are going to be 25 and younger, because that has sort of been the last several years where esports has really come about. I think as that group ages and as more younger people that watch esports and play those games, as they come through, I think we're going to see esports get more and more popular as years go on, and I think eventually it's going to hit a critical mass where more major, more mainstream media outlets start to pick up on those types of things. As it stands right now, I believe Riot more or less controls its own media as far as the broadcasts go and as far as it's released to YouTube, that sort of thing. I think there may be someday, and I think that's good, by the way. I don't want to get rid of that idea, but that's really good because it is a widely available platform. You don't have to pay extra on top of your normal internet bill to watch live esports, which I think is one of the other very broad appeals. I pay for an NFL subscription so I can watch NFL games live, out-of-market games, because the Jaguars are not local to the Indiana area. So I have to pay that extra on top of the bills I already have. I think one of the big draws of esports is I don't have to pay any extra to watch those. And I think that's awesome. So I think esports will continue to grow. Are they a sport by themselves? No. But I think that's why they've been termed esports, because there are so many similarities outside of the one aspect of no. They don't require physical exertion. Everything else, though, is sport-esque. The communities are sport-esque. The rabid fanatics that follow the teams are sport-esque. The media coverage, at least the online media coverage, because yes, it's mainstream, but you could argue that the MLS media coverage isn't really mainstream either. There are those things. So I think it's getting there. I think that it'll be a while yet before it is really picked up by those big mainstream TV markets, for instance. I don't know if there's a day in the near future where we'll see League of Legends being played on network TV. In fact, I almost guarantee that won't happen in the near future. However, you start thinking about some of those other mainstream platforms that have sort of their own side platform. Think like ESPN.com. Maybe use it with, I believe it's ESPN3. Used to be called something 360 or whatever they call it now. Or some of those side cable networks like ESPN2, where, you have things like poker on ESPN2. It's not a stretch to think that ESPN could pick up esports for one of those other non-central channels that they run. Other Fox Sports would be another good one that you could sort of look at that in the same way. So I think it's getting more popular. I think it is in the same league as sports, even if it is not strictly a sport. It is an esport. So is it fair to call esports just sports? Almost. It's getting there. It's not quite mainstream enough yet, but we're almost there. Really excited for video games becoming more sport-esque. It's been really cool to watch in my lifetime as that sort of picked up and became more and more mainstream, now to the point where it's much more accepted than it used to be as far as looking at gaming as a sport. So that's going to be it from me for Hoosier Hardware today, guys. I know this was a shorter episode, and that was by design. I didn't want to run long today. It's a Tuesday. I'm just trying to get through the week. Tomorrow's Wednesday, halfway there after tomorrow. So I'm going to go ahead and roll that outro now. And I guess I should roll it. There we go. And everybody, have a wonderful rest of your week.